They told him he didn't look like he belonged in first class. They told him his ticket had to be stolen. For 45 minutes, Silas Vance stood at Gate 42 of Chicago O'Hare, humiliated, mocked, and threatened with arrest, while bystanders laughed. The gate agent, Brent, thought he was just doing his job by keeping the riffraff out. What Brent didn't know was that the man he was blocking wasn't just a passenger. He was the man who had just signed the check to buy the entire airline. And when the airport director sprinted across the tarmac to intervene, Brent's world didn't just crack, it shattered. This is the story of a billion-dollar mistake. The fluorescent lights of Terminal 3 at O'Hare International Airport hummed with a low, headache-inducing frequency. For Silas Vance, the sound was usually drowned out by the quiet luxury of a private hangar, a glass of aged scotch, and the soft leather of a Gulfstream G650's cabin. But today, the G650 was grounded in Teterboro with a hydraulic leak, and Silas Vance, billionaire venture capitalist, majority shareholder of Nexus Dynamics, and the newly minted owner of Sovereign Airways, was flying commercial. He didn't look the part. Not today. Silas had spent the last 48 hours in a grueling, off-the-grid negotiation in a warehouse district in Detroit, securing a lithium supply chain that would change the EV market for the next decade. He hadn't slept. He hadn't shaved. He was wearing a faded charcoal hoodie from his alma mater, baggy grey sweatpants, and a pair of worn-out sneakers that were incredibly comfortable but looked like they had been fished out of a donation bin. The only hint of his true status was the Patek Philippe Nautilus, hidden beneath the frayed cuff of his hoodie, a watch worth more than the annual salary of everyone standing in the security line combined. He adjusted his backpack, feeling the weight of the laptop that contained the digital keys to an empire. He just wanted to get home to San Francisco. He had purchased a first-class ticket on Sovereign Airways Flight 992. Barely an hour ago, paying full fare at the counter with a black titanium card that the check-in agent had barely glanced at before handing him his boarding pass. Boarding for Flight 992 to San Francisco, first class and Diamond Medallion members only, the announcement crackled over the intercom. Silas exhaled a long, tired breath and joined the priority queue. It was short, just a businessman in a tailored suit tapping furiously on a BlackBerry, and a woman in a beige trench coat holding a Louis Vuitton carrier that likely contained a dog smaller than a rat. Silas stepped in behind them. The businessman turned, his eyes raking over Silas's hoodie and sweatpants. He sneered, a subtle curling of the lip, and pulled his carry-on closer to his leg, as if Silas were about to snatch it. Silas ignored him. He was used to it. In the boardroom, he was a shark. In the streets, without the armor of an Italian suit, he was just another black man in a hoodie. He had learned long ago that invisibility could be a superpower, but today he was too tired for sociology. He just wanted the lie-flat seat and a bourbon. The line moved. The businessman scanned his pass and walked through. The woman with the dog followed. Silas stepped up to the podium. Behind the counter stood Brent. Brent was in his late 20s, with a haircut that was too tight on the sides and a uniform that was pressed with military precision. His name tag gleamed under the lights. He didn't look up immediately. He was busy adjusting the stack of luggage tags, creating a perfect pile. "Boarding pass," Brent said, his voice flat, hand extended without making eye contact. Silas pulled his phone out, the screen displaying the QR code for seat 1A. He held it under the scanner. Beep. A green light flashed on the console. Silas moved to step forward. "Hold on," Brent said. Silas stopped. "Is there a problem?" Brent finally looked up. His eyes were pale blue, cold, and narrowed. He looked at Silas's face, taking in the stubble and the tired eyes. He looked at the hoodie. He looked at the sweatpants. Then he looked at the screen which displayed the name, Vance, Silas. Seat 1A. Brent let out a short, sharp laugh. It wasn't a happy sound. It was the sound of a gatekeeper deciding that the gate was closed. "Sir," Brent said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming authoritative and loud enough for the people in the economy line to hear. "You're in the wrong line. Economy boarding starts in 20 minutes. You need to step aside." Silas blinked, confused. "I'm not in economy. I'm in first." He pointed to the screen. Brent didn't even look at the screen. He looked Silas dead in the eye. "Look, pal, I don't know how you got that QR code or whose screenshot you're using, but seat 1A is for full fare paying customers. Now, step out of the line before I call security. You're holding up the boarding process." Silas felt a familiar heat rise in his chest. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was the weary frustration of a man who has played this game 1,000 times. "Check the ID," Silas said calmly, reaching for his wallet. "The name is Silas Vance. The ticket is mine. I bought it 2 hours ago." "I don't need to check your ID," Brent scoffed, crossing his arms. "I know a first-class passenger when I see one. And you look like you're lost. Now move." The air around the gate seemed to thicken. The chatter from the waiting passengers in the economy section died down. Everyone loves a spectacle, and nothing draws a crowd at an airport like a conflict at the gate. Silas didn't move. He planted his feet. He had negotiated with warlords and hostile takeovers. A gate agent named Brent with a power complex was not going to move him. "I am asking you to do your job," Silas said, his voice low and steady. "Scan the ticket again. Check my identification. If you deny me boarding without cause, you are violating federal aviation regulations and Sovereign Airways policy." Brent's face flushed a blotchy red. He wasn't used to people in sweatpants quoting policy. He was used to them apologizing and scurrying away. He leaned over the podium, invading Silas's personal space. "You want cause?" Brent spat. "Disorderly conduct, failure to comply with crew member instructions, suspected fraud. Take your pick. I can have the police here in 2 minutes, and you won't be flying to San Francisco. You'll be taking a ride to the Cook County holding cell." "Do it," Silas challenged. "Call them." Brent hesitated. He hadn't expected the bluff to be called. He looked at the line of economy passengers. A woman with short, spiked blonde hair, a classic Karen archetype, stepped forward from the group. "Excuse me," she yelled, waving a boarding pass. "Some of us have connecting flights. Can you just remove him already? It's obvious he doesn't belong there." "I'm handling it, ma'am," Brent yelled back, emboldened by the support. He picked up the phone on the desk. "Security to gate B14. I have a disruptive passenger refusing to leave the boarding area. Potential fraudulent ticket." He slammed the phone down and smirked at Silas. "You're done. You had a chance to walk away." Silas took a deep breath. He pulled his phone out and dialed a number. It wasn't 911. It was the personal cell number of Raymond Greaves, the current CEO of Sovereign Airways, whom Silas had just bought out, regarding the controlling stake 3 days ago. The deal wasn't public news yet. The press release was scheduled for Monday morning. Technically, the employees didn't know the ownership had changed. "Who are you calling?" Brent demanded. "Put the phone away. You are not allowed to record me." "I'm not recording you," Silas said, pressing the phone to his ear. "I'm calling your boss." Brent laughed out loud. It was a cruel, barking sound. "My boss? You think you can call the station manager? Good luck. He's in a meeting." "Higher," Silas said. The line rang. Once. Twice. "Silas," Raymond's voice came through, sounding surprised. "I thought you were in the air. We have the board meeting at 5 p.m. tomorrow. Change of plans, Ray, Silas said, his eyes never leaving Brent's face. I'm at O'Hare, gate B14. I'm being denied boarding on my own airline. What? Why? Is the flight overbooked? No, Silas said clearly. Because the gate agent, a man named Brent. Silas leaned in to read the small print on the name tag. Brent D. Miller has decided that I don't look like I can afford seat 1A. Brent's smirk faltered slightly. The specificity of Silas reading his full name unnerved him, but he quickly recovered, convinced this was a performance. Yeah, keep talking to your imaginary friend, buddy. You have to be kidding me, Raymond said, his voice turning icy. I'm in London, Silas. I can't get there. But the regional director for the Midwest is in the terminal. I saw him check in on the system earlier. His name is Arthur Pendleton. Get him here, Silas said. Now, before your security team decides to tackle me. Stay on the line. I'm patching through to operations priority. Just then, the crowd parted. 2 airport police officers, heavy with tactical gear, strode toward the podium. They weren't smiling. Is this the guy? The lead officer asked, gesturing to Silas with a gloved hand. That's him, Brent said, pointing an accusatory finger. Refused to leave the line, claiming he knows the CEO, holding up the flight. He's aggressive, officer. The officer, a burly man whose name tag read Riker, turned to Silas. He placed a hand on his taser. Sir, turn around and place your hands behind your back, Riker commanded. You are being detained for trespassing and disorderly conduct. I am a ticketed passenger, Silas said, holding his hands up, palms open, showing he was unarmed. I have not raised my voice. I have not been aggressive. This agent is refusing to scan my ticket. I don't care what you are, Riker barked. When an agent tells you to move, you move. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. Turn around, now. Silas looked at the phone in his hand. Raymond was still on the line, likely hearing everything. Ray, Silas said into the phone, you better hurry. Riker stepped forward and grabbed Silas's wrist, twisting it sharply behind his back. The phone clattered to the floor. That's it, Riker shouted. Stop resisting. A gasp went through the crowd. Several people had their phones out now, filming. The optics were terrible. A black man in a hoodie being manhandled by police while a smug gate agent watched with crossed arms. You're making a mistake, Silas grunted as he was shoved chest first against the boarding counter. The impact rattled the computer monitor. The only mistake was you thinking you could pull this scam today, Brent sneered, leaning over so close his breath hit Silas's ear. Enjoy the no-fly list. Silas felt the cold steel of the handcuffs click onto his right wrist. He closed his eyes. Patience, he told himself. Let them dig the hole. Let them dig it so deep they can never climb out. Get his other arm, Riker ordered his partner. Just as the second cuff was about to click, a voice boomed across the gate area. It wasn't a shout. It was a roar of absolute, terrified authority. Stop! Officers, stand down immediately! The command was so loud, so filled with panic, that Riker actually froze. He looked up, sprinting down the moving walkway, coattails flying, breathless and red-faced, was a man in a high-end Navy suit. It was Arthur Pendleton, the regional director of Sovereign Airways, and he looked like he was about to have a heart attack. But he wasn't looking at the police. He was looking at Silas Vance with an expression of pure horror. The command hung in the air, echoing off the high ceilings of Terminal 3 like a gunshot. Stop! Officer Riker didn't let go of Silas's arm immediately. His training was drilled deep. Secure the suspect. Neutralize the threat. He tightened his grip, his knuckles white against the dark fabric of Silas's hoodie. He turned his head slowly toward the man sprinting down the walkway, his expression a mix of annoyance and confusion. "Back off, sir," Riker barked at the newcomer. "This is a police matter. Do not interfere with an arrest." Arthur Pendleton skidded to a halt 5 feet from the podium. He was panting, his chest heaving beneath his expensive suit. Sweat beaded on his forehead, glistening under the harsh fluorescent lights. He ignored the officer entirely. His eyes were locked on the man pinned against the counter. "Let him go," Arthur wheezed, his voice trembling. "Officer, I am Arthur Pendleton. I am the Regional Director of Operations for Sovereign Airways. That man is not a trespasser." Brent, the gate agent, stepped out from behind the podium. He looked annoyed that his show of force was being interrupted. He smoothed his uniform, confident in his position. "Mr. Pendleton," Brent said, his voice dripping with false deference. "I've got this handled. This individual refused to show valid ID, caused a scene, and was blocking the boarding process for our premium passengers. I suspect ticket fraud. He claims he knows the CEO." Brent let out a derisive snort. "He's clearly disturbed." Arthur's head snapped toward Brent. The look on the director's face wasn't just anger. It was the look of a man watching someone juggle hand grenades. "Ticket fraud?" Arthur whispered, the color draining from his face. "You suspect him of ticket fraud?" "He's wearing sweatpants, sir," Brent said, gesturing to Silas's attire as if it were evidence of a capital crime. "And look at him. He doesn't belong in Warnay." Arthur closed his eyes for a brief second, as if praying for a time machine to take him back 10 minutes so he could fire Brent before this moment occurred. When he opened them, he looked at Officer Riker. "Officer," Arthur said, his voice steeling, "if you do not release that man's arm right now, Sovereign Airways will be facing a lawsuit that will bankrupt this hub, and you will be named personally in the civil rights violation. That is Silas Vance." The name meant nothing to Riker. He was a beat cop at the airport. He didn't read the Wall Street Journal. He hesitated, looking from Arthur to Brent. "I don't care if he's the Pope," Riker grunted, though his grip loosened slightly. He failed to comply. "He is the owner," Arthur screamed, losing his composure entirely. "He owns the airline. He bought Sovereign Airways 72 hours ago. He is your boss's boss's boss." The silence that followed was absolute. It rippled outward from the podium. The tapping of keyboards stopped. The murmuring of the passengers ceased. The woman with the spiked blonde hair, the one who had yelled for Silas to be removed, froze with her mouth half open. Brent's smirk didn't just fade, it evaporated. His eyes went wide, darting from Arthur to Silas. He looked at the hoodie. He looked at the sneakers. Then he looked at the face of the man he had just threatened with jail. Silas hadn't moved. He was still pressed against the counter, his cheek against the cool laminate. But now, he turned his head slowly. He didn't look at Arthur. He looked straight at Brent. "You can let go now, officer," Silas said. His voice was terrifyingly calm. It wasn't the voice of a victim. It was the voice of a predator who had just realized the cage door was open. Riker felt the shift in the atmosphere. He realized with a sinking feeling in his gut that he had backed the wrong horse. He released Silas's wrist and stepped back, unclicking the handcuff. Silas stood up straight. He rolled his shoulders, wincing slightly. He adjusted his hoodie. He picked up his phone from the floor. The screen was cracked. He looked at the shattered glass, then up at Riker. "Property damage," Silas noted dryly. "Add it to the list." "Sir, I was acting on the information provided by the airline representative," Riker stammered, his bravado gone. He held his hands up. "I was just doing my job." Silas ignored him. He turned to Arthur Pendleton. "Arthur," Silas said, "Ray spoke highly of you." "Mr. Vance?" Arthur choked out, stepping forward and extending a shaking hand, then pulling it back, realizing a handshake might be unwelcome. I am so incredibly sorry. I don't know what to say. This is a catastrophic failure of protocol." "Protocol?" Silas repeated. He walked slowly toward the podium where Brent was standing. Brent looked like he was trying to shrink into the wall. "This wasn't a failure of protocol, Arthur. This was a specific application of bias." Silas stopped inches from Brent. The gate agent was trembling now. The power dynamic had flipped so violently it was almost palpable. "You said I didn't look like I belonged," Silas said softly. "Tell me, Brent, what does the owner of a $4 billion airline look like?" Brent opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He licked his dry lips. "Sir, I didn't know. You have to understand, we get a lot of scammers." "Is that right?" Silas asked. "And do you ask the men in suits for their ID before scanning their ticket? Do you threaten to arrest the women in trench coats?" "I was just following security measures," Brent whispered, his eyes pleading. "No," Silas said. "You were power tripping, and you just tripped over the wrong man." Silas turned to the crowd. 50 people were holding up phones. He knew this video would be viral before the plane wheels left the tarmac. "Arthur," Silas said without looking back. "Yes, Mr. Vance? Is this flight full?" "I believe so, sir." "Yes." "Good," Silas said. "I want everyone on this flight to receive a voucher for a free round-trip ticket to anywhere Sovereign flies. Compensation for the delay." A murmur of shock and excitement went through the crowd. The tension broke slightly. "And Arthur?" "Yes, sir." Silas pointed at Brent. "Get him out of my sight. Take his badge. He's done." Brent looked as if he had been physically struck. "You can't fire me," he stammered, a sudden burst of desperate defiance surfacing. "I'm union. There are procedures. You can't just—" "I own the company, Brent," Silas cut him off. "I can dissolve your entire department if I feel like it. But you're right. I won't fire you right here." Silas leaned in close. "I'm going to suspend you pending an investigation into discriminatory practices. I'm going to have the legal team pull the CCTV footage from every shift you've worked in the last 6 months. If I find one single instance of you doing this to anyone else, I won't just fire you. I will sue you for damages to the brand. I will make sure you never work in aviation again. You'll be lucky to get a job guarding a mall kiosk." Brent's face turned a sickly shade of grey. He slumped against the wall, defeated. Arthur gestured to 2 other gate agents who had been watching from the jet bridge door, paralyzed by fear. "Escort Mr. Miller to the operations office. Take his badge and his access card. Now!" As Brent was led away, dragging his feet, the crowd parted for Silas. It was like Moses parting the Red Sea. The sneers were gone. The impatience was gone. In their place was a mixture of awe and fear. Silas walked toward the jet bridge, but his path was blocked by the woman with the spiked blonde hair, Mrs. Higgins, according to the luggage tag on her bag. She had been the loudest voice calling for his removal. Now she stood in his way, clutching her purse. "Excuse me," she said, her voice high and shrill. "Mr. Vance, was it?" Silas stopped her. He looked down at her. "Yes?" "Well," she huffed, adjusting her scarf. "That was quite a show. But some of us have tight connections. You've delayed this flight by 20 minutes with your little drama. I hope you plan on doing more than just handing out vouchers. My time is very valuable." Silas stared at her. He blinked once. The audacity was almost impressive. "Mrs. Silas looked at her bag. "Higgins." "Dr. Higgins," she corrected him. "I'm a dermatologist." "Dr. Higgins," Silas said smoothly. "You were shouting for the police to arrest me 5 minutes ago because I was holding up the line." "Well, you were," she insisted. "If you had just dressed appropriately, none of this would have happened. It's really your fault when you think about it." Arthur Pendleton stepped forward, looking horrified. "Ma'am, please!" Silas held up a hand to stop Arthur. He smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "You're right, Doctor," Silas said. "My appearance was distracting. I apologize." She preened, looking vindicated. "Well, at least you can admit it. Now let's board. I need a pre-departure drink." "Arthur," Silas said. "Yes, Mr. Vance?" "Dr. Higgins seems very concerned about the quality of the passenger experience in first class." "Yes, sir." "Refund her ticket," Silas said. Dr. Higgins's jaw dropped. "Excuse me." "Refund her ticket," Silas repeated, his voice hard. "Full price, and remove her from the flight." "You can't do that," she shrieked. "I paid for this seat. I'm a Diamond Medallion member." "And I'm the owner," Silas said, stepping around her. "Sovereign Airways is a private company. We reserve the right to refuse service to anyone who harasses our staff or our passengers. You harassed me. You actively encouraged a wrongful arrest. You're a liability, Doctor." "This is illegal," she screamed, her face turning purple. "I'll sue. Do you know who my husband is?" "No," Silas said, stepping onto the jet bridge. "And I don't care. But tell him he's flying another airline." He walked down the tunnel, the sound of Dr. Higgins screaming at Arthur Pendleton fading behind him. The flight attendants at the door of the aircraft were standing at attention. They had been radioed. They looked terrified. The lead attendant, a woman named Sarah with kind eyes and shaking hands, bowed her head as Silas entered. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Vance," she whispered. "We are honored to have you." Silas looked at her. He saw the fear. He hated it. He didn't want to rule by fear. He wanted to rule by competence. But today, fear was the only tool he had left. "Thank you, Sarah," he said gently. "Just a water, please. No fuss." He walked to seat 1A. He sat down. The leather was cool. The legroom was vast. But as he looked out the window at the tarmac, watching the baggage handlers toss suitcases onto the conveyor belt, he didn't feel like a winner. He felt exhausted. And he knew the war wasn't over. It had just begun. The plane didn't move. 30 minutes passed. The passengers had boarded, filing past Silas with wide eyes. Some whispered. One teenager gave him a thumbs up, but mostly they avoided eye contact, as if looking at him might result in them being ejected like Dr. Higgins. The captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Reynolds. We are fully boarded and ready to go, but we have been asked to hold at the gate for a moment by ownership. We appreciate your patience." Silas sat in 1A, his laptop open. He wasn't looking at spreadsheets. He was looking at the live internal feed of the airport operations. He had logged in using the admin credentials Ray had given him days ago. Arthur Pendleton appeared at the cabin door, looking even more disheveled than before. He walked over to seat 1A and crouched down in the aisle, treating Silas like a king on a throne. "Mr. Vance," Arthur whispered. "We've removed Mrs. Higgins. Her luggage is being offloaded. We're ready to push back." "Not yet," Silas said, not looking up from his screen. "Sir?" "I'm looking at the staffing logs for O'Hare," Silas said. "Tell me, Arthur, who is the duty manager for Terminal 3 today?" Arthur swallowed hard. "That would be Frank Miller." Silas paused. He turned his laptop screen toward Arthur. "Miller? Any relation to Brent Miller?" Arthur winced. He pulled at his collar. "They are brothers, sir. Frank is the older brother. He got Brent the job." Silas closed the laptop with a soft snap. "Nepotism," Silas muttered. "It explains the arrogance. Brent thought he was untouchable because Big Brother runs the terminal." "Frank is a good manager, usually," Arthur tried to interject. "He's been with us for 15 years. "Get him on the plane," Silas said. "Sir, Frank is in the control tower. He can't just—" "Arthur," Silas said, turning his head. His eyes were dark voids. "I am not asking. If Frank Miller wants to keep his pension, he will be standing in this aisle in 5 minutes." Arthur nodded frantically and scrambled off the plane. The first-class cabin was silent. The businessman who had sneered at Silas in the security line was sitting in seat 2B across the aisle. He was pretending to read a magazine, but the pages weren't turning. He was sweating. Silas looked at him. "Nice suit," Silas said. The man jumped. "Thank you," he stammered. "It's Italian." "You shouldn't judge a book by its cover," Silas said, leaning back and closing his eyes. "Or a hoodie." The man gulped and buried his face in his magazine. 5 minutes later, heavy footsteps thudded on the jet bridge. Arthur returned, followed by a large man with a thick neck and a red face. This was Frank Miller. He looked like an older, angrier version of Brent. Frank didn't look scared. He looked furious. He stormed onto the plane, ducking his head to avoid the overhead bins. He saw Silas and stopped. "So you're the guy," Frank boomed, his voice filling the small cabin. "Pendleton tells me you're the new owner. That gives you the right to humiliate my brother?" The flight attendants gasped. Arthur looked like he wanted to faint. Silas opened his eyes. He didn't stand up. He remained seated, looking calm and relaxed. "I didn't humiliate your brother, Frank," Silas said. "He humiliated himself. And now you're doing the same." "Brent was following protocol," Frank shouted, pointing a finger at Silas. "He saw a suspicious passenger. He acted. You think because you have money, you can come in here and treat my family like trash? I run this terminal. Nothing moves without my say-so." "Is that a fact?" Silas asked. "Yeah, that's a fact. You want this plane to leave. You apologize to Brent. You give him his badge back. Or I swear to God, I will have the ground crew walk off the job right now. You'll be sitting on this runway until next Tuesday." It was a mutiny, a direct challenge. Frank was betting that the new owner wouldn't want a labor strike on his first day. He was betting that Silas was soft. Silas smiled. It was a genuine smile this time, a smile of a man who held a royal flush while his opponent was bluffing with a pair of twos. "Arthur," Silas said calmly. "Yes, sir," Arthur squeaked. "Is the cockpit door open?" "Yes, sir." "Captain Reynolds," Silas called out without raising his voice much. The pilot stuck his head out. "Yes, Mr. Vance." "How much fuel do we have?" "Full tanks, sir. Enough for San Francisco and 2 hours of holding." "Good," Silas said. He turned back to Frank. "Frank, you're fired, effective immediately, for insubordination and attempted blackmail." Frank laughed. "You can't fire me. The union—" "I'm not firing you as a union employee," Silas said. "I'm firing you as a manager. And regarding your threat to pull the ground crew—" Silas picked up the cabin interphone handset. He punched in a code. His voice boomed through the entire aircraft and, because the external speakers were on, out onto the tarmac. "This is Silas Vance. I am the owner of this airline. I am speaking to all ground crew personnel currently servicing Flight 992. Your manager, Frank Miller, has just threatened a walkout to protect his brother, who discriminated against a passenger. I am offering a $5,000 bonus, cash, paid tomorrow, to every single ground crew member who ignores Frank Miller and gets this plane in the air in the next 10 minutes. However, anyone who walks off the job with Frank will be terminated for cause and blacklisted. The choice is yours." He hung up the phone. Frank stared at him, mouth agape. Outside the window, Silas could see the ground crew. They had stopped working for a second. Then, one guy gave a thumbs up to the cockpit. Then another. They started moving faster than they had all day. Silas looked at Frank. "Looks like they made their choice, Frank. Now get off my plane." Frank Miller looked around the cabin. He saw the passengers looking at him with disdain. He saw Arthur refusing to meet his eye. He realized he had just lost a game he didn't even know the rules to. He turned and stormed off, cursing under his breath. "Arthur," Silas said. "Yes, Mr. Vance. You're the acting terminal manager now. Congratulations on the promotion. Don't make me regret it." Thank you, sir." "Thank you." "Now," Silas said, reclining his seat. "Close the door. I have a company to run." As the heavy door thudded shut and the engines began to whine, Silas finally let out the breath he had been holding for an hour. He closed his eyes. The karma had been swift. The revenge had been sweet. But as the plane taxied toward the runway, Silas knew that the real challenge wasn't punishing the Millers. It was changing the culture that created them. And that would take more than a first-class ticket. The cabin of Flight 992 was pressurized to 6,000 feet, but the atmosphere inside felt heavy, as if the gravity of the situation at Gate B14 had followed them into the sky. The hum of the engines was a steady drone, usually a sound that lulled Silas Vance to sleep. Today, it sounded like the drumbeat of a coming war. Silas didn't sleep. He couldn't. He sat in seat 1A, the lie-flat pod extended just enough to be comfortable. The laptop was open again. He had purchased the premium Wi-Fi package, an irony that wasn't lost on him, paying $20 to use the internet on a plane he owned, and was watching the world react to what had just happened. It had been less than an hour since pushback, but in the age of social media, an hour is a lifetime. Twitter, now X, was ablaze. The hashtag #LookSovereignShame was trending #1 in the United States. A passenger in the terminal had filmed the entire interaction from a low angle. The video was shaky, but the audio was crystal clear. It showed Silas standing calmly in his hoodie. It showed Brent sneering. It showed the police officer twisting Silas's arm. And, most importantly, it showed Arthur Pendleton's terrified sprint and the revelation of who Silas was. The caption read, "Airport security tackles a black man for looking poor in the first-class line. Turns out he owns the airline." The look on their faces at the end, Karma Sovereign Airways. The video had 4.2 million views. Silas scrolled through the comments. Sue them into oblivion. Why does he have to be the owner to get respect? What if he was just a regular guy? They would have jailed him. That gate agent needs to be in prison, not just fired. Silas rubbed his temples. This was a PR nightmare. He had bought Sovereign Airways to turn it around, to make it the gold standard of American aviation. Instead, his first act as owner was becoming the face of corporate bias. He felt eyes on him. He turned his head to the right. Across the aisle, in seat 2B, the businessman was staring at him. This was the man who had sneered at him in the security line, the man who had clutched his bag as if Silas were a pickpocket. The man's name, according to the flight manifest on Silas's screen, was Preston Hayes, a mid-level executive for a pharmaceutical chain. Preston didn't look arrogant anymore. He looked like a man who had realized he was trapped in a metal tube at 35,000 feet with a lion he had poked with a stick. "Mr. Hayes," Silas said. The cabin was quiet enough that his voice carried clearly. Preston jumped, rattling his gin and tonic. Mr. Vance, I didn't mean to stare." "You were staring quite a bit in the terminal too," Silas said, his voice devoid of malice, just factual and cold. "You seemed very concerned about the safety of your laptop bag." Preston turned a deep shade of crimson. It's been a long week. I wasn't thinking. I made a snap judgment. It was wrong." "It was," Silas agreed. "You know, Mr. Hayes, the hoodie I'm wearing. It's from the tech incubator where I wrote my first code. It's comfortable. It reminds me of where I started. The suit you're wearing. Is it an Armani?" "Boss," Preston squeaked. "It's a Hugo, boss." "Boss?" Silas nodded. "Mass-produced. Decent cut, but the stitching on the lapel gives it away. You wear it to project success, to make people think you have power. I wear this because I have power, and I don't need to prove it to you." Preston looked down at his knees. "I understand, sir." "Do you?" Silas asked. "Because if I hadn't been the owner, if I had just been a 19-year-old kid who saved up for a dream trip, you would have stood there and watched me go to jail. You might have even applauded." Preston didn't answer. There was no answer. Silas turned back to his screen. A notification popped up. A news alert. Breaking. Traumatized. Passenger claims Sovereign Airways owner was abusive. Silas clicked the link. It was a video interview from the terminal. Dr. Higgins, the dermatologist who had been kicked off the flight, had found a local news crew that was at the airport covering a weather story. She was standing there, fake tears streaming down her face, playing the victim with Oscar-worthy dedication. "He was menacing," Dr. Higgins sobbed into the microphone. "He was aggressive. He was screaming at the poor gate agent. I tried to intervene, to protect the staff, and he used his billions to bully me. He kicked me off the flight just for standing up for the working class. This is billionaire tyranny." Silas let out a low, dark chuckle. "Sarah," he called out softly. The flight attendant appeared instantly. "Yes, Mr. Vance? Can I get you anything?" "I need you to authorize a data dump from the gate security cameras to my cloud server," Silas said. "I know the plane has a localized uplink to the operations center." "I can try, sir. I'll have to ask the captain to unlock the data channel." "Tell the captain it's an order," Silas said. "Dr. Higgins wants to play media games. Let's see how she likes the unedited footage." 10 minutes later, Silas had the raw video files from the gate. It showed everything. It showed him standing silently. It showed Brent's aggression. And, crucially, it showed Dr. Higgins screaming, pointing her finger, and demanding his arrest while he stood perfectly still. Silas drafted a tweet from his personal account, which he hadn't used in 2 years. "Truth is a currency. Spend it wisely. Here is the unedited footage from Gate B14. Judge for yourself. As Sovereign Airways will be under new management, starting with the culture. Accountability." He attached the video. He hit send. He watched the numbers climb. 1,000 retweets in 10 seconds. 10,000 in a minute. The internet detectives went to work. Within 5 minutes, Dr. Higgins's Yelp page for her dermatology practice was being flooded with 1-star reviews. Her Facebook page was inundated. The narrative she tried to spin collapsed under the weight of cold, hard, digital evidence. Silas closed the laptop. He reclined the seat all the way back. He looked out the window at the clouds beneath them, a white blanket covering the mess of the world below. He had won the battle, but the war for the soul of the company would happen tomorrow morning in the boardroom. The landing in San Francisco was smooth, but the arrival at the gate was a spectacle. When the cabin door opened, Silas didn't see a jet bridge. He saw flashing lights. The paparazzi had gathered. News vans were parked on the tarmac perimeter. Silas stood up. He grabbed his backpack. He didn't change out of his hoodie. He walked off the plane, past the flight attendants who looked at him with a mix of reverence and terror. "Good flight," Silas said to Sarah. "You and the crew handled the stress well. Expect a bonus in your next check." Sarah beamed. "Thank you, Mr. Vance." Silas walked into the terminal. A wall of microphones was thrust into his face. Reporters were shouting questions over one another. "Mr. Vance, are you going to sue the police department? Silas, is it true you fired the entire staff at O'Hare? What do you have to say to Dr. Higgins?" Silas stopped. He raised a hand. The crowd fell silent. "I have one statement," Silas said, his voice calm but projecting clearly. "Sovereign Airways has been a great American brand for 40 years. But somewhere along the way, it forgot that it transports people, not cargo. Today, I was treated like a criminal because I didn't fit a stereotype. Tomorrow, I ensure that never happens to another passenger again." As for Dr. Higgins and Mr. Miller, the footage speaks for itself. Actions have consequences. Thank you. He pushed through the crowd, flanked by his personal security team, who had met him at the gate. He got into the waiting black SUV and drove away, leaving the chaos behind. The next morning, the sun rose over the San Francisco Bay, casting a golden light on the glass tower that served as Sovereign Airways headquarters. Inside the boardroom on the 40th floor, the air was cold. The air conditioning was on full blast, but the 12 members of the board of directors were sweating. They were old money, men and women in grey suits who had run the airline into the ground while collecting massive bonuses. They had agreed to the buyout because the stock was tanking, but they expected to stay on as advisors. They expected Silas Vance to be a silent owner, a tech guy who just wanted a toy. The doors swung open. Silas walked in. He wasn't wearing the hoodie today. He was wearing a bespoke Tom Ford suit, navy blue, sharp enough to cut glass. He walked to the head of the table. He didn't sit down. "Good morning," Silas said. "Good morning, Silas." The chairman, a man named Sterling Archer, no relation to the spy, said nervously. "We saw the news. An unfortunate incident. We've already drafted a press release apologizing." "Tear it up," Silas said. He threw a file onto the table. It slid across the mahogany surface and stopped in front of Sterling. "What is this?" Sterling asked. "That," Silas said, "is a termination order for the security contractor we use at O'Hare, and at JFK, and at LAX. We are bringing security in-house. We are retraining everyone." "But the cost," one board member protested. "The cost of not doing it is my reputation," Silas snapped. "And I value my reputation more than your quarterly dividend." Silas pressed a button on the remote in his hand. The large screen at the end of the room lit up. It wasn't the video of the arrest. It was a spreadsheet. "I did some digging last night," Silas said, pacing the room. "Since I couldn't sleep, I looked into the employment history of Frank and Brent Miller. Did you know that Frank Miller has had 42 HR complaints filed against him in 10 years? 42. Harassment, bullying, wage theft." The board members shifted uncomfortably. "And yet," Silas continued, his voice rising, "he was promoted 3 times. Why? Because he's the nephew of one of the people in this room." Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. Silas turned and looked directly at a board member named Ellery Vance. No relation, purely coincidental surname, which made it all the more stinging. "Ellery," Silas said. "Frank is your sister's son, isn't he?" Ellery turned pale. "Silas, it's a complicated family dynamic. I didn't know." "You buried the complaints," Silas said. "You protected a toxic manager because of blood, and you let him rot the culture of my airport from the inside out. Frank Miller wasn't just incompetent. He was protected. By you." Silas pointed to the door. "You're off the board, Ellery. Resign today, or I release the internal emails proving you covered up his misconduct. And if I release them, the SEC might want to have a chat about failure of fiduciary duty." Ellery stood up, shaking. He didn't say a word. He gathered his papers and walked out of the room. The door clicked shut. The remaining board members were terrified. Silas Vance wasn't just a tech billionaire. He was a surgeon, and he was cutting out the cancer. "Now," Silas said, finally sitting down at the head of the table. Let's talk about the future. I'm promoting Arthur Pendleton to VP of Customer Experience. He was the only one who ran toward the fire yesterday. We need more Arthurs and fewer Brents." He looked around the table. "We are going to be the airline that treats the janitor with the same respect as the CEO. And if any of you have a problem with that, you can follow Ellery out the door. Are we clear?" "Crystal clear, Silas," Sterling whispered. The karma hits. 3 weeks later. Brent Miller stood in the unemployment line at the Department of Labor office in downtown Chicago. It was raining. He didn't have an umbrella. He had applied to Delta. Rejected. United. Rejected. Even the private security firm at the mall had turned him down. His name was radioactive. When people Googled Brent Miller, the first 10 pages were articles about the incident. He stepped up to the counter. The clerk, a tired woman with glasses, took his paperwork. "Reason for termination?" she asked, not looking up. "It was a misunderstanding," Brent mumbled. She typed his name into the system. She paused. She looked up. She recognized him. "Oh," she said. "You're that guy." "Look, I just need my benefits," Brent said, feeling the eyes of the people behind him burning into his back. "Actually," the clerk said, turning her screen, "it says here your former employer, Sovereign Airways, is contesting your unemployment claim. They cited gross misconduct and civil rights violations. You aren't eligible for benefits, Mr. Miller." "What?" Brent shouted. "They can't do that. I have rights." "You have the right to appeal," she said, handing him a form. "The waiting list for a hearing is 6 months. Next." Brent walked out into the rain. His phone buzzed. It was a text from his brother, Frank. "Frank, just got served. Sovereign is suing us for damages to the brand. They want $5 million. Dad is furious. Don't come to Sunday dinner." Brent looked at his phone, then up at the grey sky. He saw a Sovereign Airways jet climbing through the clouds, banking toward the west, soaring high above him. He realized then that Silas Vance had been right. He had tried to block a king, and the castle had fallen on top of him. He pulled his hood up, a cheap, flimsy thing that offered no warmth, and walked into the cold, invisible, and alone. And that is how Silas Vance turned a moment of humiliation into a legendary cleanup operation. It's a powerful reminder that you should never judge a book by its cover, or a billionaire by his hoodie. Brent and Frank Miller learned the hard way that when you abuse your small amount of power, you might just run into someone with real power. Silas didn't just get revenge. He fixed the system. He proved that true leadership isn't about wearing a suit. It's about standing up for what's right, even when you're standing alone. What would you have done if you were Silas? Would you have fired them on the spot, or did he let them off too easy? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of high-flying justice, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a story about karma hitting back. Thanks for watching. And remember, be kind to everyone, because you never know who you're talking to.